I stood in a glass box over the bay, while rain sliced the water into fishing line stripes. Masts whined, mooring lines slapped pilings, and the AC in the conference room pumped air so cold it felt quarried. The senior partner adjusted his glasses and read it like a traffic report. "There is no valid will, Miss Barrett." The sentence hit the long wood table like a dropped anchor. Evelyn laid a gentle, calculated hand on Grant's shoulder and smiled at the shareholders as if our family had just completed a tasteful ceremony. "To keep operations smooth," she said, "I'm appointing Grant interim CEO. You know that split second when a wave stands up in your face and your hands aren't on the wheel and there's nothing but cold space behind you?" That was me, black coat wet, boots still smelling like the docks. Grant tipped his head, the kind of smile that belongs on jewelry, not a face. "You lived on base for years," he murmured for me alone. "Books and deals not really your lane." The firm's assistant slid a fat folder across the table. Blocks of text were blacked out like bandages on a fresh cut. I tapped the redactions. Clean copy. The gray-haired lawyer shook his head. "Private agreements between Mr. Barrett and Ms. Evelyn. Not relevant to you, Mr. Barrett." My father cracked in my ear like a dry rope. I could smell his soap, that clean bite clinging to his collar whenever he came in from the yard. I could hear what he said before the pain took him under. "Keep your head, kid." I asked for an inventory, for access to the technical files on our flagship, the North Current, for the key to the blueprint vault. Evelyn didn't look at me, she watched the color of the rain through the glass. "The transfer was proper," she said. "To avoid conflict, your badge is disabled starting today. Once things settle, we'd love your input as a consultant. A send-off disguised as an invitation. Mason nowhere yet. Red nowhere yet. Just me at a long table of relatives who felt like strangers." I bit my lip to keep from laughing. The old habit clicked on the mission plan. Define objective. List assets. Assess risk. Only this enemy didn't wear a uniform, and this battlefield hid behind clauses and signatures. The senior partner shut the lid on the coffin. "As for a will, we haven't located any legally enforceable document." "Video, a handwritten letter?" I asked. A pause, then a shrug. It was too clean to be clean. The whole room was scrubbed gray carpet, spotless glasses, the kind of clean people think can rinse the memory off the dead. I wrote in my leather notebook, "No will contested." "Check safe cabin, desk underside." The ballpoint left a faint tremor from the cold. Chairs scraped in a tide going out chorus when the meeting adjourned. Evelyn drifted past, that over sweet ocean perfume. "Sloane," she said warmly enough for an audience to believe it, "rest. You've been through so much. Some lines are silk and never wipe a thing clean." Grant leaned close, smile foggy. "Quit while you're ahead. You don't want your name in the news." I looked him in the eye, steady as clearing a weapon before a flight. "You're young," I said. "You can afford to believe that." I walked the polished corridor, my reflection pacing beside me like a second shadow. The glass doors opened to the docks, kelp and diesel in the wind, and the rain smacked my face like a stranger, telling me to forget. I stood under the awning long enough to slow my pulse, then pulled my phone. My contact list is lean now, like the last rounds in a long op. A couple of former teammates, a port cop or two, a court clerk I met during funeral paperwork. I texted myself one-line objective, prove Dad's intent. Start at North Current cabin. I pocketed the phone, lifted my collar, and felt every cold stone of the steps through my boot soles. Gulls hunched on the rail, eyes bright. Everything here watches you, dock cams, silent stevedores, even a few black SUVs loitering too long in the far lot. I didn't look back. People who've learned to move through foreign towns without leaving a footprint know when to pretend they didn't see. I crossed sodium puddles toward the yardside gate. My badge chirped a dry little beep and flashed red. Locked out, just like Evelyn promised. I smiled, not surprised, just relieved the battle lines were finally painted. "You cut my straight path, I'll take the long way. You fog my sightline, I'll duck and look under." An old dockhand face like weathered lumber squinted from the shack. "Barrett girl," he said, "still out in this rain?" I nodded. "North Current still at Pier 3? He hitched a shoulder toward the dark hull, tucked into the sky's same shade, I know that boat's engine note and every flake of paint on her bow the way I know my own scars. In her cabin there used to be a walnut box where my father kept the spine of the business designs, insurance, letters. If there's no will, I'll start by proving the no was deliberate. The rain thickened as I took the slick railing down the dock. Wet planks groaned. Water slapped the hull. At the cabin door, a brand new lock gleamed. Someone had changed it. I touched the cold metal and, automatically, my brain drew the diagram: who holds keys, which camera sees this angle, which shifts leave gaps, what route gets me inside without becoming a thief in my own house. In the little window, my face hair pasted wet, eyes even. Someday I'll tell this like I'm talking about the tide. Today isn't that day. I turned to go. The phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. One line: don't flip rocks at the shoreline, oysters cut deep. An old threat dressed in new rain. I tilted my face up and let the water rinse the ache from my temples. It wasn't the first time someone tried to scare me off. It wasn't the first time I walked into a mission where the objective wouldn't hold still. I opened my notebook and added beneath the mission plan: adversary knows the bay, trusts their rules. Response: change the rules. I shut the book, slid it inside my coat, and headed for the warm lights of the firm that had turned its back on the docks. If they like making calls in heated rooms, I'll bring the storm straight to their table. I'm built for wind. Tonight the rain is fine as dark glitter, laying a quiet sheen over the bay. I sit in my apartment facing the seawall, coffee gone cold. The salt in the curtains yanks me back to a hospital corridor, slick and white, where rubber soles ticked on tile like a clock tapping glass. I was still in Europe then, peeling myself out of a windowless briefing room layered with gridded maps. The call was 4 words: your father's crashing. I took the earliest flight, cleared 2 checkpoints, never shut my eyes. On the plane I penciled a checklist like any OP: talk to the doctor, pull the chart, confirm the walnut box's location in the cabin. The plan was tidy. Hospitals don't care about your plan. Video 89 Part 2 Vit TXT B letter 1 I3 N G letter 1 E D 1 C T I letter 1 E B F N G V I letter 1 E C 7 T C let E 8 N E 7 S in A A P S Li N 7 N 2 blang M and mean letter 1 to 0 letter 1 E D C H letter 1 ED3 IT letter 1 B0 letter 1 EDF NGB letter 1 EC7 NH5I letter 1 EC7 Tang L letter 1 EAC5 Man OM a letter 1 ED1 I camera #7 to Fong Bai to letter 1 EBB N8 letter 1 EDB Lam NGU letter 1 ED3 N Tham CHI letter 1 EBF UD letter 1 ECBH Sang TI letter 1 EBF NG An. When I got there, Dad's breath was shallow, but his eyes were clear, like water before a storm. He held my hand, boatman's calluses fencing out the rest of the noise. Keep your head, kid, he rasped through the pain. In the cabin, the walnut box: don't let anyone decide for you. I nodded, careful not to promise anything too big. At the docks, promises get traded like parts. The soap and antiseptic mixed into a smell that would stick to my nights. When his heart stopped, the monitor sang a straight line as cold as a blade. I stood there feeling some unseen line slip free whatever had tied my boat from drifting. Seattle buried him under wet morning light. Dock men in heavy coats held their knit caps, eyes down on their boots. Evelyn's black veil was perfect. She held my shoulder longer than needed in front of local cameras. Grant tucked white flowers into a crate beside the portrait and flicked his eyes toward the shareholders in the back. I watched hands, Tilda's thin ones trembling without skipping any ritual, a stevedore's palm pressed over his chest like a flag salute, Evelyn's hand almost never leaving her phone. After the ashes, an old boat painter with blue-green on his sleeves tugged me close. Storm night last week saw a box carried from the cabin to the lot. Dark as hell, but the box walnut brass latch. Could he see who? He shook his head, black raincoats. But the car parked right under camera 7. After the service, I hit the yard. My father's office door was a fish mouth emptied of organs. Shelves naked, drawers stripped by someone who wore gloves and patience. The carpet where he'd stand to read the morning paper showed drag marks from something heavy. I got on my knees under the desk, feeling for the old flat screw, his hiding spot for a tiny key when he wanted to tease me as a kid. Cold, slick, nothing there but dust. On the desktop, a sun-faded rectangle where a frame had sat. Emptiness has a shape. Before they pushed me out, I detoured through drafting. The North Current sprawled on paper like a whale coming up to breathe lines drawn by someone who truly knew water. A young engineer looked up, recognized me, flicked his eyes at the ceiling cam, and buried himself in work. I didn't blame him. In places like this, loyalty lives on a ledger. I took mental pictures to redraw later: shelf angle, file crates, the sightline of camera 7 down the opposite hall. That night I went to the business court to ask how to freeze the status quo until a will could be established. The clerk, eyes sharp as a letter opener, listened. She made no promises, just set her pen on the counter in a deliberate rhythm, like tapping caution into the air. "Ms. Barrett," she said quietly, "oysters live under the rocks on this shoreline. Flip carefully. I know that kind of advice, it doesn't tell you to stop. It tells you not to pretend the shore is smooth." I nodded, took a slot on the calendar, and walked out under humming fluorescent lights that sounded like small waves. Back home, rain on the downspout knocked like spoons in a mess tent. I opened my laptop and listed objectives: recover the walnut box, verify any video, ask Tilda about cash withdrawals before Dad declined. I called Tilda. Her voice was old but iron. "By morning," she said, "I'll see what floats up in the fund logs." I hung up and stared at the bay. A tug slid past, its dim light dragging a broken trail. I thought of Europe: cold canals, damp stone steps, windows that never opened all the way, faces watching through curtains like they owned your story just because you walked by. It's the same here, different smell. Footsteps in the corridor. One beat, two, then nothing. I waited, counting heartbeats before touching a doorknob is a habit that doesn't leave you. Through the peephole, empty hall. On the mat, a thick brown envelope. Black marker on the face for Sloane. Straight letters, no flourish, a decisive push on the downstrokes. I set it on the kitchen table and listened as if envelopes breathed. Nothing but rain. A paring knife kissed the seam. Inside, a micro SD card taped down and a note: "When the bay is muddy, look to the bottom of the glass." Not some high-speed cipher, more like a rendezvous line. Someone was standing at the water's edge, facing what I was facing. The card lay in my palm, light as a blink. Out here, the lightest thing can sink a boat. I killed the kitchen lights and left the desk lamp the narrow yellow cone I use when I need to tighten my focus. Outside, rain kept at it, but inside me, the surface changed as if a master builder had nudged a bow, and the hull slid off the blocks with no one hearing except the ones who listen for a living. The envelope didn't give me answers. It gave me the right question, and the right question is worth more than an easy answer. I exhaled, short and clean, like a go signal. Then I sat down, fed the card into the machine, and watched the screen bloom with a new device alert. Night leaned toward me. The water started to move. Morning hits, and before coffee can carry its weight, I can already taste the warm metal tang of worry. I flip open my laptop and check last night's card. 3 things only: a TXT labeled camera #7, a rain-smeared still of the lot, and a shaky red arrow toward a corner where a license plate blows out in glare. No video. No will. No miracle. But I've got a heading. I write it in my notebook: camera #7, pull footage cross-check storm night. Under it, a smaller line: who sent this? Someone on my shore. No name. Just a breath close enough to fog the glass. At the yard gate, the young guard gives me the polite smile people use like a poncho. Your badge still isn't active. Behind him, a brand new culture of safety poster with Grant's signature in the corner. I tuck my hands in my rain shell and step back into the weather. Containers stack like row houses, each box a shut story. Working the margins means walking those walls without making sound. Rent doesn't care about dignity, so I take a temp night watch at the auxiliary pier. I know graveyards. The crickets here are halyards knocking and winch line teeth squeaking. I sweep the blind corners, listen for a weird note under the wind. On break, I sit on the wet steps with a can of hot soup and watch deck lights sway. Every now and then a black SUV ghosts past way out there, lights skittering across the water like someone popped a flash. I don't turn my head. People who've learned to move in the dark know when to let the dark think you didn't notice. Tilda calls late afternoon, voice dry as old ledger paper. I live in the numbers room. I look where people think they've hidden things, she says, and sets a meet at a worker's diner by Warehouse 7, the kind of place where fryer grease and salt drown 1,000 conversations. She's already there when the rain hardens, raincoat on the chair back, hair clipped with a cheap plastic claw she's probably had since the 90s. She slides me a worn notebook. Cash, she says, bled out over 6 weeks before he was hospitalized. Not big hits, but neat. Look memo column marks. Tiny forward slashes in groups of 3, each cluster a few days apart, with a faint dot in the corner. Someone wanted it to read like petty wage advances, she says, but anyone who knows my hand knows I always slash backward. These are forward. Somebody else's hand sat in her books. Then the emergency maintenance fund pumped up, money stepping through to a fresh vendor with a real address and 0 past what we call a shell, and on the withdrawal slips, Evelyn's calm, manicure neat signature. Educated, tasteful, planned. That night I pull a black coat and show up at the Yacht Association party, what people call networking when they mean casting. Decks polished to mirror. Champagne laughing at the bay. Evelyn does the mic with a ruler straight smile. We thank the Barrett family for a smooth transition, she says, stretching smooth until it touches every ear. My name doesn't make the trip. Grant stands beside her in navy on navy, someone taught him color theory. A man bumps my elbow. Barrett, heard your tense post-service. Hope you don't bring base energy to the docks. Laughter rolls back like a retreating tide, leaving shiny cans on the sand. I don't answer. Officers know when to sheath the blade. I step onto the side deck, where salt hits like my father's wake-up slap. My phone hums, you won't win. Leave the shore before you lose fingers. I look at my hands, knuckles solid, nails short, silver nicks at the cuticles. People born to a shoreline threaten with the body first. What scares me isn't that they know anatomy. It's when they know the law. I duck into a convenience store after and buy a cheap recorder and blank cards. Not because I'm afraid of misspeaking, because every op deserves its own black box. On the drive home, a dark car sits at a careful distance, not close enough to call it tailing, not far enough for me to read the plate. I take a hill, the street lamp wheezes. The car slides past like a shark that's already marked the water. I don't change course. Sometimes the surest way not to lose your heading is to keep going where you planned and let the rest expose themselves by wanting so badly to stop you. Back on post, the shift drags. A gray-beard stevedore drops a thermos of hot coffee on the stairs and winks. Don't let the rain soften your head, Barrett. From the guard box, the lot under camera 7 sits inside chain link, like a cheap frame around an expensive picture. In a few hours I'll be in the port office asking for the footage. I don't expect easy, but I've got a list of people who owe my father small things, and on this waterfront, debts outlast oil stains. End of shift, bones heavy, I hit the earliest divey coffee place by the industrial park, sticky tables, waffle scorch in the air. I set last night's brown envelope on the wood and watch its shadow like a bait fish waiting for tide. The bell rings. Wet steps behind me, a touch on my shoulder so light, a civilian would call it a draft. I turn. He's there, dark jacket, eyes the color the bay turns right before the sky breaks. He sets down a worn challenge coin stamped with an anchor. Your father said if the water ever turned muddy, he says. Voice low, I was to put this in the right hand. He pulls out a chair. I don't know his name yet, but I know the type, no wasted words, no cheap silence. And I know this too, the whirlpool just showed its face. The coin sat in the sticky diner wood like a metal eye. I rubbed the edge smoothed by years of pocket wear anchor stamped on the face with a clipped motto. The man gave a small nod, like we'd shown passports for a serious conversation. Reed Lawson, he said, voice low, words ebbing like surf against rock. Former SEAL. Your father asked me to deliver a few things if it went bad. He waited until I met his eyes, then set a waterproofed bundle on the table, a USB stick, a sheet folded in quarters, and another micro SD. A thin lift of coffee steam hung between us like rain on glass. "I'm not on a side," Reed said, "except the one he asked me to stand on. If the sky changed, he wanted his daughter to be the first to see." I opened the note. My father's hand came back like dried oil paint, firm, slow, disciplined. First line, Sloane, if you're reading this, I couldn't say it myself. Then 3 bullets, video in the North Current cabin, handwritten letter in the walnut box, asset list and accounts. In the margin, Evelyn is holding a temporary set because I was dumb enough to believe in smooth. My fingers bit the paper until the knuckles went white. Red touched the table edge, not me, like he was tying off my boat for a minute. "And this," he tapped the USB, "a backup of the video. I made it. No one else knows." We paid and slid to a wall table, backs to the room, eyes on the glass for reflections. OPSEC 101. I plugged in the USB. One folder, a video file, a blurry scan of the letter, a simple spreadsheet listing hulls, spares, and a maintenance account. I didn't hit play. Muscle memory said verify first. I ran my tool hash string, falling across the screen like rain beads on a gutter. No flags in my comparison set. Metadata stamped the storm night the old painter mentioned. Lightning artifacts flickering in a few frames. A coarse GPS point hid in the tags mooring area 3. Every piece clicked like halyards when wind shifts. I opened the video. Tight cabin light, a little shake. My father sat facing the lens, old flannel, hair the color of sea foam on rock. He cleared his throat, dipped his head like greeting someone just off frame. "Sloane," he said, thin but unmistakable, "this yard was born of resin and salt, not speeches. If papers get scrambled, my intent is this: you run it. Evelyn's holding paperwork, I told her too, thinking people could behave. If I'm wrong, you know what to do." He tried a crooked smile and rapped twice on the table, the way he sealed decisions. "The walnut box under the cabin, the latch, you know, don't let them burn it." I scrubbed back those 2 taps and listened again. Small signal. Pure dad. Reed leaned into his chair, eyes never leaving the room's movement. "I promised him hand-to-hand delivery," he said. "No color commentary. One last thing." He slid over a thin envelope. Inside, a photo of a handwritten letter, muddy scan, but legible. First line was his mantra about keeping my head. At the end, Dad's signature in a smeared stroke, where someone had tried to hide a postscript. Red shrugged. "The original ought to be in the box." I didn't touch it. People who respect boundaries make better allies than enthusiasts without breaks. The spreadsheet mirrored Evelyn's smooth transition, talking points, everything from spare engines to the rail cradle, hull insurance to sweetheart mortgage. One entry flagged emergency maintenance fund, with odd little marks in the notes column. I screenshotted and pinged Tilda. She replied with a single exclamation mark. Lines were tying Tilda's ledgers. Camera 7. Reed's USB. Now I needed the box and the key. "Keys where?" Reed asked, reading my cursor like a heartbeat. "If my father is still my father," I said, "it's clipped under his old desk." Reed nodded, then tilted his head, half concern, half heads up. "That office is taped off." Heard the guards joke someone's tried the lock a few times. Somebody else was hunting the same thing for a gap, not the truth. Gaps let official stories glide in like luxury hulls through a ribbon cutting. I shut the laptop, pocketed the USB and card, and dropped Dad's coin into my front pocket, 2 taps of metal against bone. "How far do you want to take this?" I asked. "I promised delivery," Reed said, pulling up his hood. "I didn't promise a fight." He left a draft of cold air and one line that felt like a debt I owed to the water when it's muddy. The swimmer with the longer breath wins. The bell over the door rang and the rain swallowed it whole. Outside, I walked the seawall, palm on the coin, knees finding the rhythm of warped planks. In the lot near camera 7, old tire tracks showed darker than the wet wood pencil marks someone forgot to erase. I counted 3 waves and turned down the service path toward the taped office. The X of security tape glowed amber in the hall light. At the doorframe's bottom edge, a fresh, thin scratch. Someone had probed with a slender tool. I gloved up and touched wood, clean cut, patient hand. You can spot a practiced picker by how tidy they leave the line. I tipped my face to the rain and let it rinse my eyes. The mission plan added a new line by itself: preserve evidence. Step 1, Get a formal inventory of the seal. Step 2, open with Tilda and a friendly port cop as witnesses. Step 3, pull the key if it's still there. Step 4, hit the north current at low tide, when boards grip and eyes tire. First, admit the cold fact I'm not the only set of feet on these planks. Other steps are mapping my boards. Time to turn my feet into wind so when the lock pops, the click is something only I can hear. Passing the guard shack, I stopped. Anyone ask about the old office last night? The kid blinked, thought, then lowered his voice. Woman in a hood. Low heels. Boutique ocean, perfume. You know the kind. Oh, I know it, the fake sea. I thanked him and kept walking. My pulse strangely calm the water's skin just before the first lash of wind. In my pocket, Dad's coin ticked my phone, 2 neat knocks. A seal. A start. The hallway light flickered like a watching eye right as a small metal click whispered from the far side of the taped door. Morning drizzle threads the air as I stand outside a red brick litigation shop, thumb worrying Dad's coin like a dead man's switch. The man who comes to get me walks straight, jaw like a bulkhead, someone comfortable with orders. Mason Kincaid, he says, quick handshake. His eyes sweep the hallway like checking angles of fire. Heard you need someone who doesn't mind heavy weather. I lay the USB and printed metadata on a small conference table under a photo of old Marines on a ship's deck. I need the law run like an op, I tell him. He skims fast, stops on the frame where Dad taps twice on the table. Intense clear, Mason says. The issue is chain of custody. We'll move for a preservation order now. He dials and reads off a jump list like a pre-helicopter checklist demand letter. Preservation notice, litigation hold to Evelyn, the Port Authority, and the Hull insurers. By noon, Tilda's in the doorway, rain dripping off her coat onto the mat. She empties a bag ledger, bank prints. Mason yields his chair, listens like he's on TAC radio. Here, Tilda taps the memo column, a string of cash withdrawals disguised as emergency maintenance. The approver switched the same week. Mr. Barrett went in the hospital. Under magnification, the obedient pen lines show a tiny wobble, the tell of a different hand. And this line, she adds, moves to a brand new vendor, Mariner Harbor Services LLC, real address, 0 history. Mason nods, writes front company. In a leather notebook, then looks at me. We need eyes on the docks. Who do you trust? Alonzo Vega, I say. He can smell fish guts through cologne. Alonzo shows late afternoon in a soaked canvas jacket and shoes that land like iron. Barrett, he grunts. Word is you're flipping a table. He takes the tasking pull camera #7. Scrub the lot from the storm night. Follow the walnut box. I need 2 things. He holds up 2 fingers. A letter that makes the data move, and a name in the camera room who owes your old man a smoke. I give him the number of a night shift supervisor Dad once gave a paid day off in midwinter. On this waterfront, favors outlast oil. Alonzo's smile creases. Then we've got a key for the first lock. While Mason is banging out the demand letter, a soft hiss at the door makes me look up. Reception slides in a plain white envelope. Inside, a photo of me on last night's dark dock, and a note with 4 words, don't jump off deck. The ink smells freshly mean. Mason glances, one eyebrow up. Good. Printed threats play well at court. He clips it to the demand letter like a pebble in a pocket before wading a river. I breathe once and feel the muscles at the base of my skull let go. Not because I'm not scared, because fear finally has a name. Late afternoon, the court faxes back they've received the motion and will calendar it this week. Mason forwards copies to the port. My phone buzzes. Alonzo's screen grab admin panel says #730-day retention. Storm night clip is alive. He texts. Got a view on site. I've got the supervisor at 22-0. My throat goes sand dry. Go, I reply. He fires back a dockhand glyph, 2 slashes like a tiny anchor. Back at my apartment. The air tells on itself, wind smells wrong inside. Kitchen untouched, living room too. But the tape strip behind a small wall frame is tugged crooked, the kind of tell you learn when you've hidden microcards behind frames in a dozen temporary base rooms. I stand still, water in the pipes, rain on glass, a hair-thin metal tick from somewhere. Nobody here. They just wanted me to know they can be. I shoot photos of every detail into a file called spoliation risk, Change the lock bar, add a steel brace not to keep them out, to clock them next time they come in. At 22:00 the camera room glows blue. The light paints Alonzo's face the color of deep water. The night supervisor rubs his neck, mumbling how Mr. Barrett was a good man. He scrubs back to the storm. #7 shows a slice of rain-slanted dock, a black SUV tucked to the blind corner. Two figures in black rain gear carry a box the size of a forearm toward Lot 3. The plate blooms white with glare until a lightning tear freezes the scene for 2 frames, and we catch the first letter and the last 3 digits. Alonzo taps the screen. Enough for DMV, and enough to kill no evidence. I snap a photo. A live wire runs my spine. Not victory shape. Mason calls as we step onto the loading dock. Judge took the motion. Signing a temporary order in the morning, no one touches the old office or the North Current until we inventory with witnesses. He sounds like a pilot announcing tailwind. Day after, we push for a preliminary hearing date. I nod though he can't see it. Rain needles my hands. Alonzo buries his fists in his pockets and tips his face to the weather. Ready for this shoreline to tell the truth? He asks. The shoreline always does, I say. People just prefer the sound of wind. He laughs a low, rusty chuckle and slips into the dark like a harbor cat. Home late. I blade a light through the door crack, old habit gone dull from use. Nothing new. I eat noodles standing at the counter and think about the crooked frame tape. The line don't jump. And Dad's 2 knuckle taps in the video. Before bed I write in the book Day 5 allies take shape. Day 6 open office. Get key. Hit book. Under it I draw an arrow toward a small box. No art. Just a straight line. Morning, Mason hands me the demand letter packet. The language sits in my palm like a knife that finally fits. From here on, he says, every attempt to wipe evidence becomes grain for our harvest. My phone buzzes. Unknown container yard, row C. Come alone talk. Attached, a pic of scuffed blue-green paint with a V-shaped scratch. The tone reads more sleep-starved than threatening. I text the pin to Alonzo and Mason 2 rows back. Then I go. The yard is a city built of steel, rust and rain rising like a cold smoke. I step into row C, cranes thumping in the distance like dry thunder. A figure peels off a stack. Hood high, hands buried. Pale face, dark crescents under his eyes. He looks around like a lost kid before he can look at me. Sloane, he says, voice shredded. This went too far. He swallows, digs out a folded stack, printed emails. You don't know Evelyn. Wind kicks the hem of his coat. He drags a breath, blinks hard. She told me his throat closes, then opens, hands shaking. She told me to burn the box. Wind threaded the container rows and howled through steel, seems like a mooring line yanked too hard. Grant stood a pace off, gripping a stack of emails like a fish just netted. In his eyes it wasn't fear so much as fatigue. Mom told me to burn it, he said, voice smaller the second time, but I didn't. I held out my hand. He hesitated, then set the pages down. Subject lines pricked like needles: re-estate coordination, urgent documents, parking bay plan. One chain mapped cars and bodies on the storm night. Another said, to keep the shareholders' meeting smooth, non-essential documents must disappear. The sender Evelyn's private counsel. I thought we were clearing trash, he whispered. Then I saw the video you have and I understood. What do you want in exchange for the truth? I asked. He breathed out, rain beating on his brow. If possible, not to be dragged into civil liability. He stared past me where the rain fell at an angle. She raised me. But I don't want to lose everything if she sinks. The word mom broke his voice and then it knitted back together. You testify straight, I said. Mason will ask the court to consider your position on the civil side. No promises of heaven, just the chance of fair. Grant nodded like a man about to fall, deciding to grab the piling. There's a backup USB in my trunk. Her lawyer sent it. I'll bring it. He slid into the rain, a pale streak of ink. I shot Mason images of the emails over the encrypted app. Flip, conditional, need protective order. He rang almost instantly. Good, he said, dry as case law. We'll file a fraud on the estate complaint with an emergency order to compel data from Evelyn's firm. And we'll throw a subpoena at that Mariner Harbor Services LLC. He asked about Grant. I laid out the terms. Leave him a legal off-ramp, Mason said, but remember every concession is in writing, not breath. Behind his voice I heard a printer chew paper and a stapler bite noisier than a punch, more useful. That night Alonzo texted, got the black SUV. Daily rental, card traces to a subsidiary of Mariner Harbor. He attached the renter's photo, a young woman with a low ponytail and clear frames. Decoy, he typed. The chain pulled tight in my head. Emergency fund, right arrow, shell company, right arrow, rental, right arrow, camera, #7, right arrow, walnut box. The missing piece was the key, and we were standing in front of the tape. Next morning, a judge signed a temporary order. Nobody touches my father's old office or the North Current until we inventory with named witnesses. Mason held the paper like a boarding pass. This afternoon, we go in. He called Port Police Officer. Riva's an old doc friend of my dad's to witness. Tilda hugged her ledger like a hymn book, eyes bright the way old hands get when someone calls them back to the ways things should be. I kept my breathing even, the way you do before you jump into cold water. Then Evelyn threw mud. A local site ran a tidy, cruel item. Sources say Sloane Barrett struggles post-service, displays controlling behavior. Cropped photos, me in the rain, me on the dock. Comments split like waves against a rock. Reed texted one line, don't let the wind borrow your lines. I killed the screen and tipped my head up to let salt pull me out of the useless anger. Media sludge is muddy water. My job was to make my lungs last. At 14:0, Officer Rivas slit the seal with a box cutter. The sound one clean sheriff felt like release. The room smelled of damp wood and paper dust, just like the day I crawled under the desk and found nothing. The carpet still scarred where something heavy dragged. Mason body cammed the whole thing, narrating time and names like coordinates. Step 1, inventory, he said. I went to my knees and reached under the desk where, years ago, a flat screw held a tiny metal loop. My fingers found cold, familiar metal. A quarter turn and the loop sprang. A key the size of my fingertip dropped into my palm, heavier than memory. Tilda exhaled like a diver breaking surface. Mason opened an evidence bag and I let the key clink inside. Cabin key, I said, keeping my voice level. We resealed the office and moved to the dock. The North Current lay there like a sleeping whale. The cabin lock gleamed, now bearing a fresh court seal, bright as a vow. Rivas logged the time. The key seated like a hand finding its hand. One twist, one tiny click I'd been waiting to hear for nights. The door opened to oil, old leather, and dry salt, my father's scent. Mason read the entry time for the record. Tilda hovered with the ledger, a secretary of the sea. Inside the folding table, the torn cushion he never fixed. I crouched at the auxiliary bunk and felt along the hull liner. There, tucked in shadow, the walnut box, grain like wind lines across water, a tarnished brass latch. I set it on the table. No one spoke. Mason's lens watched. The latch stuck. Tilda handed me a cloth, one wipe, metal side. The latch gave. The lid rose. Paper, heavy and honest, exhaled old ink. On top, a large envelope, last will and testament, Barrett Shipwright Company. Below, a manila folder, asset inventories signed by my father on every page, beside a round stamp from a notary everyone in this harbor knows. At the bottom, the handwritten letter, the original, and the smeared mark at the end of the copy, now resolved into a legible postscript. If these papers fall to the wrong hands, I trust you know how to bring them home. Tilda's palm climbed to her chest like a flag salute. Mason lifted the camera off his eye long enough to nod at me once. The little cabin went as quiet as a church when everyone's breathing in time. We sealed every document in numbered evidence bags, shot photos, logged chain of custody. Rivas signed. I'll courier copies to the judge tonight, Mason said, and serve data subpoenas on Evelyn's firm. Tomorrow morning we file the complaint. He glanced over. You want a ride home? I'm good, I said, and I was calm in a way that felt like a hull sliding off blocks. Not victory bearing. Leaving the yard, my phone buzzed. Grant, I have the lawyer's USB. Emails after the funeral. Includes Mom's directives. I sent the diner pin. His reply landed fast on my way. Another text popped from an unknown, you just opened a door that shouldn't be opened. The words were cold, but the stink of desperation came off them like warm diesel. I stopped under a shop awning and laid Dad's coin in my palm, the edge cool on my skin. Any door that needs opening, I told the rain, I'll open. I slid the coin back into my pocket, zipped my coat, and walked into the watercolored light toward the same small diner where our story had changed tempo once already and was about to do it again. Small courtroom, dark wood ceiling, tall windows letting rain keep time like a drummer who never misses. Judge Kingsley sits straight, jaw still while the clerk reads the file list. Mason leans in like an officer giving last checks before a beach landing sequence chain of custody on the box. Roll the video at 10:30, tilde on the maintenance fund, then Grant. His palm settles on the brief, his eyes level. Across the aisle Evelyn sits with private counsel, black dress crisp, gaze fixed on a pretend point on the wall rehearsed in a mirror. Mason opens calm. He walks the court through the preservation order, the unsealing of my father's office, the cabin key, the witness list. He reads each seal number like coordinates. Officer Rivas confirms. Every detail is a small deck screw that keeps the argument riding the water. Kingsley nods barely, his pen taps twice in his book. Mason cues the bailiff, play the will video recorded aboard the North Current. Lights dim, screen rises. My heartbeat sounds like a capstan starting up round and steady. The cabin's narrow amber light fills the room. My father faces the lens, old flannel, sea foam hair. Sloane, he says, my intent, you run the yard. Evelyn holds papers for now. If I was wrong to trust, you know what to do. 2 knuckle taps thud in that little room and I lock my jaw. When it ends, nobody speaks. The masts in the rain do the scoring. Evelyn's lawyer pops up, high-voiced foundation. Your Honor. Mason doesn't look at him. He looks at the bench. Hash, metadata, chain of custody, and the hand-to-hand witness tabs a through E. He says hash like physical evidence. Kingsley leans back. The court admits the video for preliminary purposes and his pen stalls a beat, notes a potential obstruction issue if the paper trail was moved by design. Tilda takes the stand, small frame, gravel voice, steel spine. She opens her notebook, traces the cash withdrawals, explains the puffed-up emergency maintenance fund, the Shell Mariner Harbor Services, and the forward slashes the kind she never uses. Kingsley peers over his glasses toward Evelyn. Response? Counsel cites flexible accounting practices. Mason raps one quiet knuckle on the lectern called Grant Shaw. A whisper runs the gallery like wind through flags. Grant steps up pale as a dawn watch. He won't meet his mother's eye. Mason keeps it short. Where were you the storm night? Lot 3. Did you see the walnut box removed from the North Current? Yes. Who told you to destroy it? He looks down. His fingers grind together till a knuckle pops like a bubble. My mother told me to burn it. Someone in back inhales too hard. Kingsley's face doesn't move. Take that down verbatim, he tells the clerk. Did you do it? No. I gave it to my mother's attorney. They said they'd handle it. Counsel jumps to strike familial bias. Kingsley slices with a thin voice. This court can separate feeling from fact. Mason lays the printed email stack on the rail subject lines like needles. Prepare for shareholders, clean files, non-essential documents, and enters the subpoenas to Evelyn's firm. Then Alonzo's turn on paper, a still from camera #7, first letter and last 3 digits of the plate enough to tie to the rental contract from the Shell. The rope cinches like a proper hitch on a dock post. Kingsley rests on his pen long enough for the room to hear the rain change direction. Then the court finds preliminary grounds for obstruction and fraud relating to the estate. Appropriate matters are referred to the prosecutor. Temperature drops a degree. Evelyn's counsel takes half a second to close his mouth. On the civil side, the judge continues. The court temporarily restores operational control to Ms. Sloane Barrett, freezes disputed accounts, allows minimal supervised operating spend, and appoints a special master for inventory. Trial scheduling to follow the prosecutor's initial review. 2 pen taps periods. Only then does Evelyn look at me for real. Gone is the borrowed shine of speechmaking. What's left is someone who knows the rules just changed. She starts to speak, but her lawyer tugs her sleeve like reins on a skittish horse. Grant studies his shoes, shoulders unstrung, a man who switched sides and doesn't know his footing yet. I keep my palm on the table edge, Dad's coin presses my thigh, reminding me to breathe. Not joy. A quiet you only earn by outwaiting weather. Recess. Mason pulls me into the hall. Good. They'll try press tonight, don't bite. We talk with inventory and orders. Tilda hugs me awkwardly, raincoat and black tea. Your father would be proud, she says, eyes wet. I look through the high glass rain easing. Silver patches on the bay like baitfish turning. Alonzo texts DMV confirms. Plate matches the rental. Sent to Mason. Reed sends just 2 words, keep swimming. Back in session, Kingsley forbids anyone from touching the document stores, puts the special master with Rivas on the count, and sets a 14-day status. Evelyn's lawyer asks to speak, voice pressed flat concern for corporate safety. When a recently restored operator has a history, Kingsley lifts a hand. We rule on evidence, not editorials. The smile that follows never reaches his eyes. We sign the temporary control papers. Ink dries heavy like memory regaining its proper weight. On the steps, the wind smells of wet shell. Down in the lot, Grant waits bare-handed in the cold, eyes skittering past mine. Thank you, he mutters. From now on, I tell him, every word you say is a mooring line. Don't let it snap. He nods and backs into the shadow of a stone column. Driving back, the city feels like it swapped out a pane of glass. Same containers. Same foghorn. But the water on rock hits in a steadier beat. I loop the north current, lay a palm on her spine, feel steel that's lost its fever. Tonight the team starts the inventory. Tomorrow I walk into the office as the interim hand on the tiller, a job I never asked for, but one I'll do right. A slit opens in the western sky, light stitching the cloud's hem. I hear Dad in the video. If I was wrong, you know what to do. I do, Dad. And it isn't about winning, it's about keeping this water straight for the ones who'll work it after me. Before I leave the pier, email lands from Kingsley's clerk with the signed order, and from Ada Harper, set time to intake preliminary criminal materials. I pocket the phone, pull my notebook, and write the day's last line, tides coming in. Then I close it, lift my collar, and turn my back to the bay. The rain hasn't stopped, not really. It's just fallen into breaths. My footsteps don't groan like sorry boards anymore. They sound like a boat sliding free heading for open water. First morning back in the office as the interim hand on the tiller, I stood at the glass and watched a misty drizzle hang over the bay like the last breath of a long sleep. The nameplate on the desk hadn't changed, just the rasp of a tired intercom and a coffee machine whining itself awake. The special master and officer Rivas spread files across the table, thick as a deck sheathed in planks. They read, flat as tide tables, spare engines, rail cradle, moorage contracts, hull insurance, operating accounts. I signed receipt, signed clarifications, signed verifications. Every signature drove a nail part to hold, part to remember. Tilda on my left nodded through the numbers. Alonzo on my right stood quiet as a mast, eyes always on the door. By noon, a camera crew flocked outside the gate, lenses poking through fence wire like gulls scenting fish. I didn't go out. Mason's rule let paper speak. We taped a notice on the door, limited operations under court order. Coordinate via special master. Dockmen read it and touched their chests in a silent salute. Their boots sounded surer on the boards, as if the map beneath them had been redrawn where the lines once broke. Afternoon, the special master dropped a warehouse schedule, everything from bilge pumps to cable. Tilda skimmed spend patterns. When her finger hit the emergency maintenance line, her voice caught and then found air again. We pay the bay back by doing it right, she whispered for me alone. I nodded. Doing it right here isn't a slogan. It's knowing when to tie off and when to let go, which hull gets fixed first, and which one earns a gentle retirement. Ada Harper emailed late day to intake the video, the original will, the letter, and Grant's email stack. Mason replied like he was filing a sitrep chain of custody, witnesses hash. Words not weapons but set right, sharper than steel. The Harbor Association sent a concern about my return. I answered with a minimalist ops plan and safety checklist roles, comms, spend limits, slip schedule. People can argue feelings, they don't win against the logic of water. That night we stood on North Current's deck. Her back looked like a whale just risen from sleep. I ran a hand along her spine-clean northern steel. Cold and honest. "Fire the engine tomorrow," I told the yard chief, a man with tool hands for fists. He smiled a narrow, true smile. "Been a while since she sang," he added, eyes ahead. "Your old man trusted his ear over the gauges." I laughed, a warm ache at the base of my skull. Some measurements only pass from person to person. Grant climbed the ladder with a waterproof pouch, USBs and printouts. Eyes red from rain or no sleep. "For you," he said low. I took it without touching his arm. "From here on," I told him, "you talk to Mason. Your words match the emails and stand up to Cross. I didn't sugar it. You're not saving your mother, Grant. You're saving what's left of you." He nodded like a man learning to hold eye contact with cold water. "I know," he said, almost a whisper. "I want to do right." First time he called me I to you, not dodging change your pronouns, change your current. Harper met us, took everything. She listened sparingly, asked exactly, ticked bullets like a boatwright dabbing paint on a crack. Watching Grant's sworn statement, she wrote 3 words: intent, participation council. We finished. She shook my hand and didn't promise a thing. When a prosecutor doesn't promise, the criminal gears have caught. Day 7 after the order, the local news changed its tune. Judge orders independent inventory. Sources say video and original will exist. No apologies, none needed. Docs believe what weighs in the hand. The old painter, with blue-green sleeves, shuffled by and left a sack of warm donuts on the step. "For heat," he said. I thanked him and felt my throat pinch like coming up from a long dive into welcome air. That evening I called Rid not for help, just to say thanks. He let the silence hold long enough to hear a small wave tap rock. "He always figured you had long lungs," he said, and hung up. Men like him don't decorate sentences. I rolled Dad's coin, once one bright loop of metal orbiting memory. In the days after, we re-hung the shop's safety board toe caps, eye shields, no phones at machines. I added a line under it in Sharpie, "Don't lie in the log." The crew read it out loud at each shift. Tilda rebuilt the books, killed the old emergency fund, stood up a clean one with an independent auditor. Alonzo forwarded the rental chain and shell contracts. Mason sent them to Harper. Old hooks came out of the net, one at a time. One morning I lined up the yard crew and a knot of unemployed vets leaning on the fence for warmth. "We're opening a boat-building apprenticeship for veterans," I said. 3 months. Pay you can live on. If you finish and want to stay, there's a berth here. We need hands that know discipline and tell the truth. A soft whistle, a throat cleared. No applause. Heads nodded. On a dock, a nod is the shortest oath. Grant asked to work the docks while the case turned. Mason carved it into the record: good faith, not a bleach for guilt, just a mark of a spine. I gave Grant heavy, clean work strip, old cable, grease rails, swab decks after rain. He bent to it, sweat under a rain shell, no complaint. One day he looked up. "Sloane, forgiveness is one thing, trusting again another." "Yeah," I said. "The harbor can clear a berth, but the new line has to tie itself." He nodded and didn't drop his eyes. Evelyn stayed quiet in the house over the water. Lawyers came and went like black birds. Threat texts stopped. In their place, letters, requests, smoke so thin Mason could see through it on arrival. Harper's office sent a formal note: obstruction and document fraud under review. Nobody cheered. Justice here doesn't clang. It moves like tide, slow, steady on the moon's clock. Launch day, clouds tore into strips and the sun came down like clean glass. The crew lined the rails, hands gripping metal, eyes on me. I slid Dad's coin into my chest pocket and touched the hull. "Go on," I said, barely above a breath. North Current slid and kissed the bay steel and salt in one warm sound. The engine caught low, even washing the last shade out from under my ribs. Tilda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Alonzo smiled the rare smile. Grant stood at the end, hands black with grease, staring like a gull seeing its first wide wind. When the deck settled, I climbed to the office and read Dad's letter one more time. The postscript tied straight to the muscle. "If these papers fall to the wrong hands, I trust you know how to bring them home." I sealed the letter in a moisture sleeve, locked it, and sat back with the exhale of someone who swam far and just felt sand under their toes. Not simple happiness. Shoreline peace, the kind you only learn by trading long breaths through cold water. Outside, the bay changed color. The masts stopped grinding their teeth and started ticking like an old wall clock, steady, honest. I opened my notebook. Apprenticeship intake 10, vets first. Clean policy. Culture don't lie in the log. At the bottom, I drew a straight line out to sea. No art, just a heading. Dad would get it. And if someday another girl stands in this glass room, hears rain drum the bay, and needs a coin to remember her breath, I'll put it in her palm. The water always needs someone who can steer in weather.